excited to have you all here. If you know anyone who signed up and is missing it, this will be recorded. We'll send out that link in an email to anyone who signed up, and we'll also have it posted publicly. And why don't we get started? And anyone who's kind of coming in can figure out what's going on and figure out what they missed on the recording. So just so you know, my name is John DeRelay. I'm the head of revenue management education at Wheelhouse. Been a revenue manager for 10 years and have the opportunity to talk to all these great people. So looking forward to kind of talk to you about what I'm hearing from customers and in some of the portfolios that I do direct revenue management in myself. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Looking forward to being on here. My name is John Malone. I'm the Director of Revenue Management with Local VR. I'm based out of Denver. That's where we got our HQ, but our primary markets are Breckenridge, Park City, and Lake Tahoe. So very much ski season orientated. So looking forward to talking about that. We got 450 to 500 properties in our portfolio as well. So
perfect. And Rebecca?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Rebecca with Reven Research. We are a revenue management consultant firm. We have clients all over the globe. So a lot of different markets, a lot of different portfolio sizes from, someone who has, I think around 15 is maybe our smallest, all the way up to thousands. So lots of different viewpoints we bring to the table.
Awesome. Shane?
Yeah, I'm the revenue manager for Romy. Been here about just under 3 years now. I'm based in Spokane, Washington, but Romy operates out of Miami and New Orleans. We have about a little over 800 individual units right now, predominantly multifamily, multi-unit, urban inventory.
Perfect. And Emre?
Hi everyone, my name is Emre. I'm from Avance. I'm Director of Revenue Manager at Avance. Been with Avance over the last 7 years. Our portfolio is pretty varied across the nation. So we're about like 50 different markets, like from Southeast to West Coast, like California to Northeast. So pretty much all major destinations around little over 2,000 units, so has exposure to like all the seasons and everything. And yeah, looking forward to conversations today.
Perfect. Awesome. So if you haven't been to a revenue management roundtable, structure is pretty simple. We're basically going to talk about what's been going on roughly in the last month or quarter. We're going to talk about what's going on now, and we're going to talk about what's going on in the future. These revenue managers are really going to talk about a little bit about what they're seeing in their portfolios, but also how they're responding and what they're kind of expecting, the strategies they're implementing, the data they're implementing, that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and get started. Fall's pretty interesting season because, for many people it's shoulder season, but sometimes it's shoulder going down, sometimes it's shoulder going up. So let's just start with the question, how has fall been going for you guys? What have you been doing or acting? What has been happening that you didn't expect? And why don't we start with Rebecca?
Yeah, so I think kind of breaking out down into a couple different markets. Beach markets saw really nice fall before the hurricane situation. We'll just call it the situation because it just felt like they kept coming and are still lingering out there. So I think collectively we all can vote that we don't want any more of those. But prior to that, the beach markets were pretty strong for fall break, kind of tapered off due to that. Looking at more of like the urban portfolios operated pretty much how we saw last year, good, solid. European travel also saw some really good fall bookings over in the UK. So just kind of looking at that, ski destinations, they've seen a pickup here in the last week since they finally got snow. So we're very thankful for that. So it's looking pretty good. Beach markets are now kind of slowing down, but that's seasonality. It's November. So we just have to remember that this just always happens this time of the year. We all would like to see more occupancy, but it is what it is. And we know that it's going to come in strong when these snowbirds start showing up. So overall, doing really well. Have a lot of high expectations for 2025.
You have the benefit, of kind of seeing a lot of different markets across the Southeast. I'm curious what you noticed. You know, obviously the hurricanes affected the places where those hurricanes hit, but how did it affect other markets as well?
They saw a rise. And because I live in Gulf Shores, Alabama, I've seen this kind of play out before. So as much as you hate when these storms are kind of projected to certain towns, you kind of have to plan for that domino effect. So with Gulf Shores, Orange Beach area, outside of that cone of uncertainty for those hurricanes quite a few times, we did see travelers changing plans. We did see an increase in occupancy, also from, you know, locals that were evacuating. So it was a combination of a lot of things that happened pretty quickly. So we did have to be pretty proactive, and a lot of the property managers that I worked for, really were not trying to be profitable during that time and take advantage of people. It was more of like, how can we open up, you know, length of stay? How can we, you know, help people with pets, and offering discounts to Florida locals, and a lot of things just to kind of give back. So I think that was definitely we were proactive on that and saw a return, because we've been on the other side of it, where we've also been having to go that way, to kind of get relief. So it's tough, because you don't really ever want that to be the situation, but you have to act quick and kind of not really be emotion driven at that moment.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Thank you, Rebecca.
Mhm.
Emre, do you want to take us off on the next one for what's going on in the fall?
Yeah, actually, just to piggyback on the hurricane, we've seen like pretty similar situations in 38, like where before the hurricane, like either like people are evacuating or like trying to change in their destinations, like towards the markets that are not being affected. So we've seen similar peak in October, like before and after hurricane, like in 38 and Charleston as well. So yeah, I think it's been a definitely challenging fall, but I also share those similar sentiments. We've been positively growing our revenue year over year. Only month has been seeing more pressure was September, which is partly it's due to like Labor Day shift into like August, like, and also like we had one less weekend this year compared to last year. So that was like another part in the whole markets and industry, like there was a decline in September, but October and November is coming up pretty good in most markets.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me because you both said it. I'll be interesting to hear what Shane thinks in the urban and what John thinks in the ski. But the, you know, sentiment's been pretty poor. Summers have been pretty tough. People feel like things are going down, but I consistently hear that the falls are better. Why do you guys think that perception of fall being stronger is, you know, or just performance in general seems to be better? Like, what are people doing that's causing that, or what's happening in the market? Emery, if you want to go first, and if anyone wants to chime in before we move on.
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, on our side, we implement a lot of strategies there. Like, I think it's really critical, like how we treat the supply situation in the market. It's really, obviously, we have a diverse portfolio, but it's been really mixed feelings still. In some markets, we've seen decline, but majority has been like in a positive. But like some markets, such as like Smoky Mountains, where we see like supply growth has been continue to like increase. Like, so those are the markets like we got to pay more attention, where we see more pressure on the occupancy, ADR, and last minute rate competition. So I would say it's really like market by market, and also asset type, like where we see the like bigger delta.
Yeah. I think too, the travelers have figured out that the rates go down in the fall. You know, they can have this beautiful, I mean, here our falls are beautiful. They're in the 80s, and you get that same summer experience at a less ADR. So when the economy is getting squeezed, kind of like how it is, we are seeing that repercussion. So, you know, when you're looking at your revenue goals and you're having to make up for summer being a little bit softer, that volume in fall really is a difference maker for a lot of people.
Yeah, I definitely also think, for the traveler, you have people who are squeezed, so they're looking and more willing to travel at different times. I also think there's a behavior in the PMs themselves where in the high season, people assume a certain level of performance, which makes them much more resistant to reacting to it.
Mhm.
Because we don't have those assumptions in the fall, because I think this happened last year too. Summer didn't quite
Yep.
perform as well. People did really well in the fall. There's just a willingness to be almost proactive because there's not that same expectation. So something to kind of, I'm sure that maybe we'll see if that theme comes up as people being more conservative, kind of going forward. Shane, do you want to give us
Yep.
an idea of what's going on in the fall in your markets and your portfolio?
Yeah. So like again with the hurricane stuff, we did see a noticeable bump in occupancy for the time periods that Florida was experiencing, like in-state travel around Florida landed a lot in for us in Miami. So we did get a noticeable bump on occupancy on what would have been some otherwise pretty nominal sets of dates. So like, and we didn't even have to be greedy or gross with the pricing. It was just we got a fair amount of people staying 4 or 5, even up to like a week and a half at a time that we just weren't expecting, which helped the overall kind of occupancy level, which was a nice surprise. Which again, it feels weird to be like, oh yeah, no, the hurricane totally helped us out. New Orleans, yeah, New Orleans, the had a very strong conference and convention schedule this year, like incredibly strong, stronger year over year. So that like we actually had some like really great demand weeks and weekends for most of the fall so far in New Orleans. And then yeah, Taylor Swift Eras Tour in New Orleans kind of broke all of my metrics, and trying to figure out what's going to happen next year in October is going to be super fun. But it was incredibly successful um, by the like my by Romy's metrics. It basically added on a whole other weekend to October in terms of impact that it made. So um, yeah, for the most part, fall has been pretty strong. And then strategically, it's been a fruition of a couple things, which is um, some of the properties that we were working on that we were working on doing improvements on are finally showing coming to fruition. So like we had some increased review scores that were starting to peak right around mid-September, which kind of helped out for some of the October bookings we were making. And then we were also very pointedly not chasing some of the ADRs that we'd seen. And we started doing that probably very early summer. So we really just layered in some early inventory, and then we're able to throw it in as stuff booked up, which again was aided by a couple things, but strategically it actually worked out the way that we wanted it to.
Yeah, that more conservative build a base of business and then kind of build up definitely makes sense for a large portfolio. Before we move on, I do want to ask you about T Swift, because these one-off events,
Mhm.
most people when they ever get one every couple of years if they're lucky. What is, I know you've worked with Romy for a long time. You also had done events like this in your previous position.
Yeah.
What is your strategy? You have a lot of rooms. What is your strategy in terms of pricing and how you determine your price and put that out there and manage the revenue for these kind of like large one-off events?
Yeah. Well, I've got some more practice too because New Orleans has Super Bowl coming up here.
True.
Uh, Taylor Swift specifically was a bit of a novel one. I kind of broke some things to let our calendar open up like something like 15 months in advance. And if you were looking around on any of the OTAs, there was maybe like 2 total other properties available in New Orleans when I put our inventory up. Um, and to some extent, I really didn't know what to expect. So I priced high and then was surprised when I could, well, pleasantly surprised that I could keep pushing higher. And then it got into kind of stratospheric kind of conditions, which was I knew that I could price high. I just didn't know what the upper limits were, and I thankfully can leverage the amount of inventory that I have access to. So I was able to test out what pricing I can do. That's going to be a lot more challenging if you don't have as much inventory as I do. So like from that kind of perspective, then you might kind of have to weigh what you're going to be satisfied with and what is actually going to work. And then also maybe roll in a little bit of probability, which is like, well, do I actually think that like $2,000 a night is going to work? Maybe, maybe not. But it kind of does depend on like find a level that you're satisfied with and then go from there. And
How far out were you hitting that stratospheric level, like in the booking window?
Taylor Swift, it actually took a little bit. Like we had a big hit initially when we put things online. And I was able to keep doing it. And then it turned into once there was a very considerable base. So probably 6 months out, I had a really good base. And reservations kind of slacked off. So we pulled back on some of our pricing to find out what people's level of interest was and what their level of commitment, what that they were willing to put down for was. And then once we got into probably the last 20% of remaining inventory, we were able to push it back up really high again.
That I think is a really big point because you've had a lot of experience with this.
Mhm.
I have as well in my career. A lot of people in our space, I think, make the mistake of basically pricing so high that they have to sell in the short term. And with these really big one-off events, like you mentioned 6 months, and then you actually pulled the rate back around that time and then kicked it back up at the very end.
Mhm.
Most people on these big events actually book, like they're making all their travel plans when they book the ticket, and then there's not more tickets, right? And so not everyone's going to book their accommodations, but that like right when it's announced is kind of when the biggest period happens. And then you have like another group who are kind of like would normally plan travel. And you run the risk. This happened in the Phoenix Super Bowl where like hotels did super well, but the vacation rental industry had like massive vacancy. People held their rates really long, and then everyone who wasn't sold is trying to sell to actually a surprisingly small amount of people. And I think Henry talked about this on a previous one because he managed some really high-end homes. If you have really, really high-end stuff, that you can sell in the short term because those people don't need to plan and they can make a last-minute decision to spend $20,000 to do whatever they want. But if you're like a production level home, like you're really competing against a very limited number of people who are scalping already extremely expensive tickets or who just didn't plan, but still bought their ticket a year in advance. So pretty interesting. John, why don't you tell us a little bit about the ski markets?
Yeah, one more quick thought about the high-end homes. I think like the supply is so much lower that people are going to be forced into buying whatever price that you set. So just the supply out there, supply demand, you can hold those a little bit longer, and those people will be forced into then buying those homes if those people are trying to stay there, compared to your 1-2 bedroom apartments where they might still be available weeks out. So just a thought there. Low shoulder. September was slow. I completely agree with Emery. That's like that shift happened. It kind of all that revenue kind of moved into August. So that was like kind of expectedly slow. But in terms of occupancy, like in each of our markets, I would say we were like right on par, like market wise. But what happens in the ski markets is once the leaf peeping season ends, October 10th, October 15th, everything really dies. Not too much of a reason to go to the ski market. So that continues pretty much all the way through Thanksgiving. So compared to recent years, we've kind of like, I think the market itself is kind of bottomed out a little bit, but like our company itself is slow, like kind of came down a little bit. So we're going to be re-looking at what we're going to do next year, maybe have a little bit lower midnights, a little bit further out, trying to drive a little bit more occupancy, extend our lead time where years in the past, we had a little bit more like last minute type bookings that we could hold on to and expect. I think the ski, like I'm talking like 10% occupancy in the market for Breck, Park City is even lower, Tahoe even. So I think like the competitiveness is so like it's like no reservations. I don't want to say there's more competition, but there is more competition. It's more competitive for less reservations, less guests, and I think that really, unfortunately for us, is like a drive to the bottom in terms of price. We have all of our clients who expect some sort of revenue, and you try to get some type of revenue on the books for them during that time. So it really drives us down, really brings our ADR down. We try to drive occupancy, so we do lower our rates into the shoulder season a little bit earlier, in attempt to try to please the masses. But sometimes that backfires where people get upset with lower rates. But I said this last time, I think listing momentum is something that's very much overlooked, and you have a high floor going through your shoulders months. That's really going to affect you looking into ski season. So we try to get revenue. It's going to be good for us, obviously, but also some of those homeowners. So you have self-hosts out there that they don't make any money. They have mortgages to pay, like just like everyone, but they're going to be the ones really driving their rates down. So if you are competing with them for 10% of the market and reservations, it's really competitive, and you really got to bring your rates down to try to get something on the books. And that's kind of how we approach that. Why I think it's even tougher for us in the shoulder months right now, I kind of want to flip that. I agree that people are looking for deals. My kind of theory, my loose theory, is in ski market towns, people are saving their money to go skiing. So I think not many people are going to want to go up in the shoulder months. Rather save their money and actually, go to Breckenridge, go to Park City, go to Lake Tahoe when the snow's down on the ground, and they can, save their money for a ski pass or something.
That makes sense. That's really interesting. When I was thinking about like people looking at different destinations for deals, I tend to think that's still regionally based. Like if you're looking in 30A, you might now suddenly look in the Alabama coast or somewhere elsewhere in Florida. The ski markets, I mean, it's not like they're all next to each other, right? You don't have these people driving around to different ski markets, so that you don't necessarily have that same kind of network effect. One question I wanted to follow up on, because you mentioned some of the metrics that you really look on that help you, kind of judge what's going on and judge your strategy. Touching back on listing momentum, like how do you calculate that? How do you look at it? Like how often? What do you look at? Or separately, if you'd prefer, what kind of market data are you looking at? How do you kind of collect that, and how do you look at it to inform your strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question on listing momentum. It's something that we struggle with because I think like educating your clients on that is tough to do when there's not like we have listing to book conversions, like all those like metrics that Airbnb might give you, and we're getting into building out some really cool dashboards on tracking those metrics over time and seeing how changes in copy or photos might affect that. But also, again, I think like the more important thing is trying to come up with some type of metric that you can show your homeowners that say, hey, look at what happened when you didn't get booked for 3 months. Look at how everyone else is booking. You're eventually like, ski season is going to be 80% occupied. We're going to get you booked one way or another, but might not be as early as you want. Everyone thinks that you still book travel a year out, but that doesn't happen anymore either, especially some of our older homeowners. So, they get nervous when they don't see any reservations, and that's probably a combination of, the listing kind of dying, and then also just what's happening in like just the guest behavior of like booking behavior. So that's a good question. I think we're getting better at it. I don't know if we completely have it right now to be able to say this listing died, besides being like, look, this happened last year. You didn't have any reservations. We ended up getting you fully booked. We still expect to do that. But if you want to get reservations a little earlier, look at your positioning on your first page listing numbers, right? I guess that would be a good one. How many times do you show up on the first page of Airbnb? Those type of metrics might help with that. But again, we're getting better with trying to, compile that, because right now it's, 10 different metrics that you don't really mean much month over month. But if we can get that into something that we can show our clients, I think that will be helpful.
Totally.
Then, Sorry, the second question to that.
Oh, I'm going to follow up on this just because I think it's pretty interesting. It would be nice for us to be able to find ways in the industry to measure. So hopefully next time you join us, you'll have made some progress and you tell us about it, because that idea of like a listing lying fallow and then sinking is a really big deal. And it's interesting to hear how you talk to your owners about that. It's like sometimes like you just need reservations because you need to have momentum to sell at peak rate in your high season. I've kind of wondered, do you ever think that like I talked to some people who told me they put blocks and remove them on their calendars sometimes, because if you have a totally empty calendar, Airbnb sees it as totally empty, but if you put blocks on, sometimes they see the carved up calendar as like maybe being desirable by other channels. And so they'll just like add blocks and remove them on empty calendars, and they're pretty convinced that that works. I've been curious if anyone else does anything around like the listing health or how you get those listings that are lying fallow to kind of, jumpstart.
I've done that. It does work.
You
You have to
know-
remember to take the block off. But yes, so the whole urgency thing where VRBO started a few years ago, where they'll say like X amount of days is, at 50% occupancy or whatever. It does create that consumer behavior.
That's really interesting.
Also,
Awesome. Well,
sorry, I just want to add on the blocks, like, I mean, we also know Airbnb also penalize the listings when they have long blocks in their calendar too. So I guess like I'm a little bit unsure how it works, or what's the right balance, like how long that block should stay or should be removed. Like that's one thing. We also did a couple tests, but I think what we've seen most, like we see a lot of penalties like on the search orders, like when we have huge blocks in the calendar.
yeah, I think what they're doing when they were talking to me about it is they'll put like 2 to 4 day blocks, usually on weekdays, sometimes over a Thursday or a Sunday, and just kind of randomly set, and then they let them sit for like a week or so. So the goal is to make the calendar more carved up like Swiss cheese in certain sections, and ideally on dates that aren't like super high value, just to give a little bit of impression that there's some booking behavior on it. Long blocks, I definitely think are really risky, and that's like the biggest risk of like long-term stays, which are great for revenue, but sometimes they can just totally kill a listing if you can't jumpstart it back in short stays, because Airbnb, and definitely Airbnb, but a little bit booking.com, VRBO, they don't want to show people properties that don't have evidence of booking, or that you're not sharing. Like the hotel side, it's that you're not giving them the inventory. They just assume you're not giving it to them. And so they definitely penalize that. And I've always wondered, like, do you guys all book 360 days out or around there?
Yeah, I think I'm all the
Yeah.
way out at like a year and a half.
Year and a half. So there's still a lot of people in the market that really don't release their inventory for like past 90. That's rarer, or past 180. And I think it's pretty consistent among professional revenue managers to be offering calendars out 365, even if they change the rate structures. Yeah. I would agree though that long blocks would probably damage you in this situation. Yeah. Well, why don't we kick into kind of what's going on now? And since the seasonality is weird, I'm sure John will tell us about the ski season, but we can also talk about the holidays and holiday strategy, probably the most contentious thing in my life as a pricing vendor. But just let's go over kind of like what's going on now, what strategies you're implementing, what are you seeing that's different? And Emre, why don't we start with you this time?
So on the holidays, like I think with a little bit uncertainty in the macro conditions before elections, like we've seen a little bit slower pick up this year. Like, and we're starting to see this pick up like after the elections. Over the last 2 weeks, we're seeing like more volume is coming towards like holidays. But definitely like in October, where we usually start seeing like more volume, it didn't come this year. I guess like it's been more related to micro conditions. And if you look at like in all sales, like pre-election years, like there's always like kind of a decline in sales in a lot of industries. So I think that's been what's happening here too. But the good news is like we have early snow, so that's like since we start to see like resorts are opening up, like which was an issue last year. So this year actually bringing more excitement for the ski markets, and we're starting to see those like pick up like pretty well right now, like moving towards like better direction. Still, I guess like I would say the markets that are like impacted from heavy supply growth like is coming out slower. I think that's still been the key determinant, like how the rates and occupancy and pickup is being shaped. But overall, like we've been expecting that booking window to squeeze a little bit towards like November and December, which is what's happening right now.
How are you guys going to hold the rates if you're expecting that? Like, where is your rate position compared to previous years where that wasn't as squeezed?
We're still
Yeah.
holding our rates like in the premium. We're still capturing better rates compared to last year. Like, so there's no big decline on the rates, and market dependent too. I think that's what I mentioned earlier. It's like applicable towards like all seasons and holidays too. It's really like some markets like there's no market like we need to go below last year yet, but definitely getting more aggressive in some markets as we don't see the pickup is coming out. But overall, like we're still capturing better rates. I think holidays, but I was surprised this year. I was expecting to see like perfect Saturday, 2 weeks reservations, like towards like 21st to 28th, then another 28th to like January 4th. This didn't come out, although like in some ski markets, like I would expect like that could be a solution, but we didn't really enforce it. But we didn't also see any booking trend that is coming towards like that's 7-8 reservations. Part of it, I guess, like a little bit related to with the pressure in economy, like people are booking shorter stays. Like it's been the case like whole year, and that's also like ongoing for holidays as well. So like those shorter stays are impacting potentially that booking behavior too. Yeah, I guess like it's really what's been critical like for Christmas New Year period. It's been the real like adjusting our pricing also like different peak times during that 10 days period. So that's I guess like what's been the key, and we've been implementing on our side too.
I think that's a great point. I've talking to customers just noticed, people stacked their Christmas and New Year's, which were both on weird weekdays this year. And then when we look at their booking trends, it's like that Friday in between is really becoming the peak night in a lot of these portfolios, especially I think the portfolios that aren't known for like they're in markets where the holidays aren't sold out, right? It's a little different when, that is a peak time. Speaking of which, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about the winter? You don't have to focus just on the holidays because we know you've got a lot of high season considerations here, but tell us what you guys are doing, how you guys are seeing that. Also, kind of some of your expectations, just because I think for a lot of us looking into 2025, ski markets are a little bit of a bellwether on consumer behavior to some degree. You're muted.
Sorry, I was looking through key data and stuff. So I'm seeing the same thing as Emery. Definitely in our ski markets, it's a little bit compressing on the booking window. We definitely saw a pickup over the last 2 weeks. I did not notice or make that connection that it might be associated with the election, which is super interesting. But when you look at any one of our markets, pretty much through Christmas, where like the market itself on key data is pacing below in RevPAR. It's pacing below in occupancy, and we kind of are leaning into that. Last year, we kind of held our Christmas a little bit longer than we might have wanted to. So we actually are kind of going the other way, where we're trying to drive, again, similar with our shoulder month kind of strategy, driving occupancy and driving revenue for all of our owners, rather than shooting for so many home runs. What I'm seeing with the holidays is like that Friday shift. I think everything's moved back a week. People are going from Sunday before New Year's Eve into the Sunday of New Year's Day weekend, I guess you could call it that. So I think like your peak is going to be, right over New Year's, and there's a lot less traffic coming from Christmas week, and we're trying to target that weekend before Christmas pretty strongly, actually, and really trying to drive that through Christmas to try to get essentially 3 weeks of peak season type reservations. So we are coming down on our Christmas, and that might be some challenging conversations with our owners. Like, I don't think we're like egregiously low or anything, but we are strategic. Like, we are noticing our own pacing for that weekend falling off. We're noticing the market falling off. So we wanted to get ahead of that and kind of drive more occupancy for that weekend. And then also one other kind of holiday thought is the weekend after New Year's Eve is, I think historically the weekend after holidays are not really a time for people to travel because they already traveled. So we're targeting that first weekend between, even worse, a gap weekend between New Year's Day and MLK weekend, as well as a potential place where the market's going to fall short year over year. Then going into the ski season, I'm not too worried about it. I think skiers are rabid enthusiasts, and they're going to ski one way or another. Generally, they have money too for that type of hobby. So those two things combined, especially with the world-class skiing resorts that we're in, just overall the season, we're going to be, I'm not really too concerned about it. Probably pricing right where we're at or higher, and not as concerned about making any moves right now, letting January, February, March kind of play out for a little bit longer. More so, like, our focus is on 2024, letting those rates in 2025 kind of marinate. And also what we're doing right now is actually preparing our summer calendars for 2025. So we have a rolling like 11 to 8 month calendar, depending on what branch we're in. So using this kind of downtime, it's the busiest season for reservation pickup, but we're kind of trusting our rates, letting them sit there, making moves when we need to, but letting them kind of marinate for a little bit, and looking forward already to 2025.
Awesome. One quick question before we kind of move on is, a couple times ago we had some folks talking about like the booking windows being bifurcated. I know ski markets kind of had an interesting like early window and then late window. How was your early window this year? Like the really advanced kind of
Usually those are going to be those like low supply homes, kind of like I mentioned, and those have been great. I've been really liking what like those long-term reservations were looking like. Still with our ADRs, I'm pretty happy with what we are looking at year over year on all those homes. I wish there are some homes out, like some of our larger homes, that I wish we had a little bit more pickup, a little bit more occupancy, but I'm not too worried about closing that gap. For our smaller homes, there probably weren't too many of those, to be honest. I don't know if we necessarily would want to be getting booked out that soon for some of our smaller homes.
Yeah, so really seeing, strong early window, but really making sure that it's product specific when you're paying attention to that.
Correct.
Yeah. Shane, tell us about what's going on right now.
Yeah. So New Orleans, like winter is typically not great. This year we're buoyed a little bit with a great deal by Super Bowl. And Mardi Gras always pays dividends, but that's typically still in February, so which is historically not a great month outside of Mardi Gras. It's looking about like it always does at this point, which is a pretty open calendar, which is always cause for a little bit of heart palpitations. The strategy, since Romy has so much inventory, which for low season kind of cuts the can make a pretty deep cut. So the idea is that we will go for and try and entice much longer length of stay reservations, and offer pretty good deals on either weekly or monthly kind of rates. And those are launch about now when we really start trying to pull that in. Miami, it's generally speaking, the winter's a great time to be in Miami. So it's a little bit more shoulder season leading into that very nice spring break season. So we're able to, within reason, kind of build like still do that, really focus on the base of business, but it's not as dire as it was for something like July in Miami. So we can build in a reasonable base of business and then hopefully usually charge some pretty nice rates when it gets into those people doing some last minute reservations. Um,
Based on how this year went for those markets, are you trying to pace ahead in occupancy, or are you trying to drive ADR? Where's your general kind of like pricing strategies?
yeah. In both markets right now, since we did add a pretty good chunk of inventory about March last year, the strategy has shifted more towards trying to build in some more occupancy first. So we are intentionally trying to target an occupancy drive before we start worrying about ADR. By and large, it varies property to property, but as a portfolio as a whole, that's the strategy for both markets.
Roughly, assuming that you build that base of business how you want, roughly how far in advance do you think you would see some of that shift to more of a ADR optimization approach?
Yeah, some of it is going to be derived from what behavior we're actually seeing, right? Like if people, I mean, we'll always do well for Miami Boat Show or some of the other events that bring people in. So, but like outside of those, some of those other weekends are a little bit of question mark. Like we suspect that they'll be good, but to some extent, I try and let the consumer tell me what weekends they're actually going to be traveling, and then I can work with that. And then otherwise, there is a little bit of a time component too, which January, it's probably somewhere around mid-December, and February, it's probably right after New Year's. But like again, I think we probably all of us to some extent kind of share this similar vein of frustration, which is like, well, it really seems like the booking window is shrinking, or people are buying closer and closer to stay dates. So like, I don't know, that's kind of my rule of thumb, but like,
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Shane. Rebecca, you want to tell us a little bit about what you're seeing, and then
Sure.
we'll give some thoughts on next year.
Yeah. So I do agree with everything everyone's kind of been saying. I've seen a lot of the markets where New Year's Eve is actually getting a higher ADR than Christmas. Just I don't know if that just is the way people are traveling more for family stuff during Christmas. So we do seeing those ADRs really being steady and strong, which is great for some of those destinations, other destinations that rely heavily on that Christmas booking. That is a little bit worrisome in some areas. Something that I've really been experiencing or experimenting with is length of stay. I think that's something that we can get into a rut because we just do it year over year. That's how, we require this amount of nights. But really seeing what happens when the searchability on that and how much that really does stunt your booking window is pulling those off a little bit sooner. That may mean getting higher ADR. That's kind of how you can walk some of those owners through being okay with that because they're get set in that same mindset. But really seeing a lot of that this year to the point where I'm like, let's get away from that. Like get away from, I understand protecting the calendar. I'm not saying that by any means, especially when it comes to large events. Like you want to do that, but letting the search, because the thing is when someone goes on an OTA and they search 2 nights and you have a 3-night minimum, there's not a box that pops up on Airbnb that says, hey, if you want to stay at Romy, you have to book 3 nights. Like you just don't show up. And so
Mhm.
I think that is the key in a lot of markets that have seen a huge amount of saturation and inventory growth is you've got to play that search game. So it might be taking a lower nightly stay or less nights, but pushing that ADR up because at the end of the day, most of the time you make more money. Especially with, when you look at your fees and just how much you're making per reservation, both you and the owner of that home come out ahead. So that's something I've really been leaning a lot on is kind of getting away from those restraints, and just seeing how we can really leverage that.
I think that makes a ton of sense. I mean, I think, the bigger your portfolio gets, the less restrictive you can be because
Yeah.
you have so many more things to sell. And I was working with a friend in Park City, and they were really experimenting with they were concerned about their pacing, but they had always consistently had like 5-night minimums. And he this year started to just drop the minimums, but not drop the rate. And he's really recovered his pacing. And something that we used to do at a really large scale when I was with Stay Alfred is, when you have hundreds and hundreds of units, it's really risky to not have any data points. And sometimes just spiking the primary night price, but keeping that stay low gives you an opportunity to get a lot more data points on demand, but not give up a ton of revenue. So it's like, hey, if you look at the 5-night stay you're trying to get revenue for, just take the 2 extra nights and put all that revenue on the date that everyone's going to stay. Like they're all going to stay over the Friday, they're all going to stay over the Saturday. Spike it there and drop your minimum length of stay. So now you can still retain the pricing that you're trying to do, but you get an idea if people are willing to pay it because you know that you're kind of cutting out the chance that people just aren't seeing you,
Yep. Yeah.
Really exciting. Okay, guys, well, we got about 10 minutes, so let's go around. We'll do about maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but just tell us what you guys are thinking about planning for 2025. This can be what you think is going to happen in the market. This can be some strategies you guys are working on in your team. But yeah, we'll start with you. We'll roll back around. So Rebecca, why don't you let us know what you're telling your clients and talking about in 2025?
Yeah, I think now is the time to really take a step back and look at how the year performed. Find those weak moments, find those spots where you can really go from good to great and get those things implemented now. Don't wait. Like be proactive in that. So if you had a softer spring last year, get working on those rates now. Like get that occupancy, get that revenue, because you don't know when you're going to get a hurricane or a wildfire or an earthquake or any of those other things that can disrupt your revenue plan, or have Taylor Swift announce a concert in your area. Like it can go both ways. So you really have to be proactive to your plan and kind of just a clean slate, go in, clean up your settings, some band-aids that you put on to kind of get you through sometimes. Now is a great time to go through and go, why did I put that on there? Oh, maybe because I need to adjust that length of stay. I shouldn't be holding it up so high. Or that minimum rate, I changed it 10 times before we actually got in the 30 days. Maybe I should probably set that a little bit closer to where it should be. Then I don't have to do all this work. So really just taking this time between now and the end of the year to have an honest conversation with your data of how you're doing. And then also thinking about, okay, if things repeat, how am I going to, if I didn't hit my revenue numbers, how am I going to hit them in 2025? Or what are other ways that we can gain revenue for the company, whether it's from upsells or just different things like that, thinking outside the box that's not just ADR driven, I think is really crucial when it comes to, occupancy was down this year for some companies, revenue was down, but guess what? All of your expenses were going up. So we've got to bridge that gap somehow. And just going, oh, well, we didn't get it. Okay. Well, we have to plan on how we're going to get it next year. So because a lot of the pacing is looking very similar. So we need to kind of be proactive to come up with ways that we're able to find that money somewhere else, or find it during those different slower seasons. If peak seasons aren't, ADRs are coming down, we need to make a way to hit that budget. And so make sure that from the operation side, you're doing well. And so I think that's going to be some tough conversations that people are going to have. But that's what we all do. So
Yeah. Awesome. Shane, what are you guys planning for?
Yeah, we are very, very studiously watching the reservations that are coming in for uh, like late February, March, April, May right now. Both New Orleans and Miami have very strong springs typically. So we're kind of watching what's going on right now for some of that bellwether effect to figure out, you know, are we expecting, or how strong are we expecting? So right now it's looking good again, and I think it's finally been hammered home to some of our partners and some of our owners too, that like, yeah, you probably can't chase what you got 2 or 3 years ago during the same time frame too. So that's really given me a lot more space to be able to be like, look, we're gonna layer it in. You're still gonna get your money. We're still gonna get paid. Everybody's gonna be happy here. But it's gonna look like these rates are maybe a little bit lower. You're gonna start out with a lower ADR, and that's by design. And please don't freak out. And then also, right, like it's just following that build the base strategy, which really is, I mean, for the amount of inventory that Romy has, reducing that like liability is much more important now in the current conditions. So that's kind of the reality that we're working with. And for the most part, everybody seems to be on board now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Emre, what are you guys thinking about?
So I think a lot of coming back to like supply conditions in each market. It's really like looking at the supply, understanding supply in each market differently, and also like sub locations. It's getting like very critical. I think those are the parts we're trying to get into better. Like for example, Nashville like is a hyper dense market. Like in location matters. Like it's you might have the most beautiful property, but like it depends on where you are located in the city. Like that's gonna make a difference. So understanding those portions, I guess, like as we're now like get to a level like as an industry, like where most of markets are supply heavy. So we gotta need to like find a ways to differentiate ourselves. And more people are adopting to dynamic pricing strategies, like pricing getting more accurate, like across the industry, meaning that like everyone has a great pricing, high season, low season, capturing those rates, like but different than how it was like 5 years ago. Like people would have like static pricing. So I think what's getting more important with all the changes that happened, like in the distro channels, Airbnb, Verbo, like their search algorithms, like really it's becoming a distro game a little bit, like more than pricing, really understanding like at the property level, what are the differentiation we can make, like how we can react to the properties that get into lower ratings reviews. So I think those are the next evolution. Like on our side, we've been very focused, and that's where the also like our strategies are going to be evolving.
Awesome. And John?
Yeah, I mean, that was well done by everyone. Tough to add anything to that. I definitely think strategizing for your low seasons, like we're going to be looking at our April a lot different than we did last year, our May than we did last year. Getting something on the calendar for growing that base. Secondary markets, I like for us in Summit County, you have Keystone, Dillon, Frisco, and just those type of properties really struggle. So trying to find some type of way to get those reservations on those listings calendars. Driving revenue without necessarily affecting rate. We're doing a lot of work on our own direct booking website, so building that out custom. With that, will come with like, growing our internal guest network. Doing direct mailers, doing direct emails. type promotions for those low seasons, even next summer. So we're, we haven't really given that much of a focus before, but going into this winter, that's like we're going to be releasing our new website sometime in December, I believe. So really trying to optimize those types of or add levers for us, I guess, like add more levers that aren't just price and minimum nights, and be able to control a little bit more finely some different types of things. And then I guess, yeah, I mean, that's all I got really. Everyone else kind of grabbed everything.
I got a couple, I talked to a lot of customers, and I think the biggest advice I would give right now is audit your revenue management strategy and rate plans for the whole next year in this gap at the very end of the year. A reason being, it's been a really volatile 2 years, and your revenue managers, your entrepreneurs, CEOs, whatever, everyone has been really good at coming up with solutions to respond. And we've been taping those onto our system. And I've seen a lot of customers get to the end of this year and they're like, I don't know why the rates are where they are. Just do some catharsis, audit it, strip out what you don't need or what you don't remember why you did it, and kind of re-stabilize and re-simplify your rate plans, because we're going to go through the same thing. It's going to be volatile next year. We're going to keep being like, oh, we got to do this. This is how we solve this. And you're going to keep adding to it. And you need to pull some of the, get rid of some of the trash. The other thing too is I feel like people have had really pretty good falls in a lot of places the last couple of years, and it's because they were much more willing to be conservative. I have a hunch that in a lot of the summer markets, people had a rough spring. Well, 2 years ago, last year, we didn't see the spring as being bad, so people started much higher, but we thought things were bad after the summer and the fall, so they started much lower and had a good fall. Go and make sure that your pricing is somewhat related to where you were doing historically. It's not surprising to look at people's pricing and see them just being like stacked up still and over their actuals. And it just goes back to that kind of more conservative nature where we're in an environment where there's a lot more supply, things are more competitive. If you have the scale, it's much easier to build up your revenue than to try to compete and fill everything at the last minute. So those would be the main ones for me. Really appreciate everyone on the call and all of your insights. Really wonderful. We will be sharing this out on the Wheelhouse YouTube, and look forward to us talking about this series all through 2025. We plan to plan it a little earlier in advance so you can plan for when you're going to attend. Thank you, guys.